Dr. Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck as the Confederation archaeology team swarmed over the ruins like iridescent insects. Their environmental suits glimmered under the harsh light of Kepler 247's binary stars, casting prismatic reflections across the ancient concrete and steel structure that had somehow survived 3 centuries of abandonment. Another primitive data center, Chief Archaeologist Vex Terra announced, her crystalline form refracting the starlight as she gestured at the holographic display. Late 21st century Earth architecture, typical brutalist design. The humans certainly lacked subtlety in their early days. The gathered Confederation scientists chittered in agreement, their various appendages moving in gestures of amusement. Sarah bit back a retort. After 5 years as the only human scientist on the Confederation's ancient technology recovery team, she'd learned to pick her battles. The others meant well, but their technological arrogance was as deeply embedded as their certainty that their crystalline neural networks were superior to human gray matter. The data storage systems are remarkably intact, Vex Terra continued, rotating the hologram to show the facility's interior scans. Though, of course, the binary storage medium has degraded beyond recovery. We'll salvage what we can for the museum's Earth history collection. But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes were fixed on the scan results, particularly the strange regularities in what her colleagues dismissed as decay patterns. After thousands of recovered artifacts, she'd developed an instinct for when something wasn't quite what it seemed. The degradation was too orderly, too precise. "I'd like to personally oversee the data recovery efforts," she said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. For historical context. Vex Terra's crystalline lattice flickered in what Sarah had learned to recognize as mild condescension. "Of course, Dr. Chen. I understand your sentimental attachment to these artifacts. Just try not to slow down the salvage operation." Sarah spent the next 3 days in the facility's main server room, surrounded by rows of what her colleagues saw as hopelessly primitive quantum storage drives. To their eyes, the apparently random patterns of degraded qubits were just noise, proof of the inferior nature of early human technology. But Sarah had spent years studying the quantum computing breakthroughs that had emerged in the desperate days of the First Void War, before the Confederation had even known humanity existed. "Show me what you're hiding," she whispered, running her hand along one of the drives. The metal was cool despite the desert heat outside, maintained by environmental systems that should have failed centuries ago. Another detail her colleagues had overlooked in their certainty that they were dealing with primitive technology. She connected her personal quantum interface to one of the drives, running detection algorithms she'd specifically designed for ancient human systems. The Confederation's standard archaeological software would have missed it entirely, but there it was, a coherent signal hidden in the supposedly random noise, using principles of quantum encryption that the Confederation had never developed. "Dr. Chen." Vex Terra's voice startled her. The chief archaeologist stood in the doorway, her crystalline form casting complex shadows. "We're ready to begin removing the storage systems for transport." Sarah's mind raced. She needed more time, but she couldn't let them know what she'd found. Not yet. Not until she understood what the hidden data meant. "Actually, I've detected some interesting historical metadata. I'd like another week to document it properly." Vex Terra's lattice flickered with annoyance. The salvage schedule would be severely impacted if we missed important historical context, Sarah interrupted smoothly. The Museum of Earth History was very specific about maintaining proper archaeological standards. She knew invoking the museum's authority would work. The Confederation's bureaucratic instincts often overrode their technological prejudices. "Very well. 1 week. But this had better be worth delaying the salvage operation." After Vex Terra left, Sarah returned to her work with renewed urgency. The hidden signal was growing stronger as her algorithms adapted, revealing patterns that sent chills down her spine. This wasn't just a data center. The quantum storage systems, the self-maintaining environmental controls, the hardened architecture that had survived centuries of exposure. It was all part of something much bigger. She found the first confirmation in a decoded data packet that night. It wasn't degraded at all, but perfectly preserved. Operation Legacy, RCHIV Site 23. Status: Dormant. Awakening Protocol. Armed. Sarah sat back, her heart pounding. She'd spent years studying the classified records of the First Void War, humanity's desperate stand against an enemy that had nearly wiped them out before the Confederation even knew they existed. The war that humanity had somehow won, using technologies and strategies that had been mysteriously lost to time. Now she knew why. The technologies hadn't been lost. They'd been hidden, distributed across dozens or hundreds of facilities like this one, disguised as ordinary data centers. Waiting. But waiting for what? The answer came 3 days later, in the form of an urgent broadcast that interrupted all Confederation channels. Multiple frontier outposts have gone silent. The emergency announcement declared, long-range sensors detect unknown vessels approaching Confederation space. All research teams are ordered to return to secure facilities immediately. Sarah looked at the rows of quantum drives, their hidden systems humming with dormant power. She thought about the classified reports she'd read, about the enemy humanity had faced and somehow defeated centuries ago. An enemy that had never been seen again. Until now. They knew, she whispered. They knew they'd come back, and they left us a way to fight them. The only question was whether she could convince the Confederation to look past their technological arrogance in time to use it. Outside, Kepler 247's binary stars cast harsh shadows across the facility's brutalist architecture. To the Confederation, it was just another relic, a primitive attempt at preserving data that deserved nothing more than a place in their museums. But Sarah knew better. This wasn't just a museum piece. It was a weapon, disguised as a memory, waiting for the day humanity would need it again. That day had finally come. Echoes of the past. The Confederation Council chamber was chaos. Representatives from 100 species gestured and shouted in their native languages, while the translation systems struggled to keep up. Holographic displays showed the same devastating scene repeated across a dozen frontier worlds. Confederation defense installations reduced to rubble, their supposedly impenetrable quantum shields bypassed as if they weren't even there. Our best warships can't even track them. The militant oversight director's magnetic field pulsed with agitation, causing nearby data displays to flicker. They appear and disappear at will, ignoring all known laws of quantum mechanics. Sarah watched from the observer's gallery, her hands clenched tight. She'd spent the last week trying to get someone, anyone, to listen to what she'd found in the Legacy Archive. But the Confederation's military leadership was too busy deploying their most advanced weapons, weapons that were proving completely useless against an enemy that seemed to operate outside the bounds of conventional physics. The Helix defense grid has failed at 3 more outposts, another official announced. We're getting reports of similar attacks in the Carina sector. Whatever these things are, they're expanding their offensive. They're called the Void Collective, Sarah said quietly, but in the sudden lull between announcements, her voice carried across the chamber. The council members turned to stare at her, some with multiple sensory organs, others with crystalline lattices that refracted their agitation. Dr. Chen. Vextera's voice held a warning tone. This is a closed military session. The Legacy Archive contained records of them. Sarah continued, pulling up her own holographic display. Humanity fought them 3 centuries ago, during what we called the First Void War. They nearly wiped us out before we found a way to fight back. Impossible. The militant oversight director's magnetic field sparked with dismissal. Your species was barely achieving quantum computing when you joined the Confederation. You couldn't have. We didn't just achieve quantum computing, Sarah interrupted, her patience finally snapping. We weaponized it in ways you never imagined because we had to. The Void Collective operates using principles you dismissed as theoretical. They manipulate the quantum foam itself, sliding between the gaps in conventional spacetime. She brought up the decoded data from the archive, showing weapon schematics and battle recordings that made several council members recoil. That's why your defenses are useless. You built them assuming everyone would play by the same rules of physics. The Void Collective doesn't. Neither did we, once we understood what we were fighting. This is absurd. Vex Terra's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. Even if these records are genuine, the technology they described violates half a dozen fundamental laws of physics. No, Sarah corrected, it violates half a dozen laws of physics as you understand them. Humanity had to look deeper, had to find loopholes and exceptions, because we were fighting an enemy that nearly wiped us out. The archive isn't just a historical record. It's a blueprint for the defensive systems we use to drive them back. The chamber erupted in argument again, but a new message cut through the chaos. Emergency alert. Unknown vessels detected in the Arcturus system. Confederation Defense Fleet reports complete shield failure. Requesting immediate. The transmission cut off in static. Arcturus is less than 20 light-years from the core worlds, someone whispered in the sudden silence. Sarah looked at the council members, seeing fear replace arrogance in their various physiological responses. The archive contains more than just historical data, she said. It's part of a network, a defensive grid that humanity built and then hid, knowing that someday we'd need it again. But activating it will require resources and trust. Why should we trust primitive human technology over our own proven defense systems? The militant oversight director demanded, though his magnetic field flickered with uncertainty. Because our primitive technology is the only thing that's ever defeated them. Sarah replied simply. And right now, your proven defense systems are failing across 20 star systems. The council chamber fell silent except for the steady stream of damage reports coming in from the frontier. Sarah could see the struggle playing out across alien faces and energy fields, the choice between clinging to their technological certainty and admitting that their dismissed primitive allies might hold the key to survival. Another emergency broadcast cut through the silence. Multiple contacts detected in the Sirius system. Defense grid non-responsive. Emergency protocols. Static again. The council leader's crystalline form shifted through complex patterns before settling into the configuration Sarah recognized as grim determination. What do you need, Dr. Chen? Everything you can give me, she answered. Engineers, quantum computers, power systems, and fast. Because the archive was just the first piece. There's a whole network out there, waiting to be awakened. But we have to find it before the Void Collective reaches the core worlds. You realize, Vex Terra said quietly, that if you're wrong, if this primitive human technology fails, you'll have diverted resources that could have been used for proven defense systems. Sarah thought about the hidden patterns in the archive's quantum storage, about the brilliant, desperate innovations her ancestors had developed when pushed to the brink of extinction. I'm not wrong, she said. Humanity didn't just survive the first Void War. We won it. And everything we learned, everything we built, has been waiting for this moment. She looked up at the tactical display, showing the advancing wave of destruction approaching Confederation space. The only question is whether you can set aside your prejudices about primitive technology long enough to let us save you. The Awakening Protocol. The research facility beneath New Alexandria buzzed with frantic activity. Confederation engineers from a dozen species worked alongside their human counterparts, trying to understand the principles behind the legacy archive's quantum systems. Sarah hadn't slept in 3 days, surviving on synthetic stimulants as she guided them through the intricacies of humanity's forgotten technologies. It's like they were thinking sideways, muttered Telek, a plasma-based engineer whose containment field flickered with frustration. These quantum configurations shouldn't be possible, but they're right here in front of us. That's because you're trying to force them into your mathematical framework, Sarah explained, pulling up another set of decoded schematics. The Void Collective taught us that conventional quantum mechanics was just a subset of something larger. Stop thinking about quantum states as binary and start thinking about them as... She paused, searching for the right analogy. as music rather than mathematics. A series of explosions rocked the facility. The tactical display showed another Confederation defense platform falling to the enemy advance. The Void Collective had reached the mid-rim, their ships sliding through space-time in ways that made conventional sensors useless. Dr. Chen. Vexterra's crystalline form vibrated with urgency as she entered the lab. The Council demands a progress report. The Arcturus defense fleet was just destroyed, and we're detecting void signatures approaching the Rigel system. Sarah gestured at the complex web of connections they'd mapped between legacy archive sites. We've located 37 more facilities, all disguised as ordinary data centers or research stations. Each one contains a piece of the defense network, but they're not weapons in the conventional sense. Then what are they? Vexterra demanded. Before Sarah could answer, the main display lit up with a priority alert. The image showed a Void Collective vessel emerging into normal space near one of the Confederation's primary shipyards. But this time, the sensors captured something new. A glimpse of the reality warping field that surrounded the ship. By the first light, Telek's plasma form pulsed with shock. They're not bypassing our defenses. They're changing the underlying structure of space-time itself, making our shields meaningless by altering the physics they operate on. Exactly, Sarah said quietly. That's why conventional defenses don't work. You can't stop them with barriers because they simply shift the barrier's fundamental properties. That's what humanity learned in the First Void War, and why we had to develop something completely different. She brought up the full network diagram, showing how the legacy archive sites formed a vast, interconnected web. These aren't weapon platforms or shield generators. They're reality anchors. Together, they create a metastable framework that prevents local physics from being altered. The Void Collective can't change what we've locked in place. The gathered engineers stared at the display, their various sensory organs and energy patterns registering shock as they grasped the implications. Humanity hadn't just built better weapons or stronger shields. They'd found a way to deny the enemy their fundamental advantage. But if this technology exists, Vexterra's crystalline lattice shifted in confusion. Why didn't your people share it when you joined the Confederation? Sarah's expression darkened. Because we knew the Void Collective would return eventually. And we knew that if their void warping technology became common knowledge, someone would try to replicate it. The temptation to wield that kind of power would be too great. So instead, you hid it, Telek realized. Disguised it as primitive data centers, knowing everyone would dismiss them, and waited until the day we'd need it again. Sarah finished. But now we have to wake it up. All of it. And we have to do it before. Another alert cut her off. The tactical display showed void signatures appearing throughout the inner rim. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The Void Collective wasn't just probing anymore. This was a full invasion. How long? Vexterra demanded. How long until you can activate the network? Sarah looked at the progress indicators, at the vast sections of the network still dark and dormant. The activation sequence has to be perfect. If we get it wrong, if the reality anchors don't synchronize properly, we could tear apart the fabric of space-time itself. We need at least 12 hours tow. The Void Collective will reach the core worlds in 6. The militant oversight director's voice came from the doorway. His magnetic field was jagged with barely controlled panic. Either wake up your ancestors' technology now, or we evacuate what we can and abandon the outer systems. Sarah stared at the display, watching the enemy advance. Humanity had built this network as their last line of defense, hidden it away against this exact moment. But they'd never intended it to be activated in half the minimum safe time. Get me every quantum physicist and engineer you can find, she said finally. Human, Confederation, anyone who can understand multidimensional mathematics, and get me direct access to the Confederation's primary quantum computing cluster. The primary cluster. Vexterra's crystalline form flickered in alarm. But that controls all of our remaining defensive systems. Exactly. Sarah met her gaze steadily. Because either this works or none of those defenses will matter anyway. She turned back to the network diagram, to the intricate web of reality anchors waiting to be awakened. It's time to show the Void Collective that they're not the only ones who know how to change the rules of reality. Legacy systems. The Quantum Computing Center thrummed with energy as Sarah and her hastily assembled team raced against time. Holographic displays showed the Void Collective's advance across 3 dimensions of space and 7 dimensions of quantum probability. They had 4 hours left before the enemy reached the core worlds. The synchronization algorithms are ready, Telak announced, his plasma form pulsing with nervous energy. But the error margins are in the picosecond range. If even one reality anchor activates out of sequence, then we tear a hole in space-time and possibly destroy half the galaxy. Sarah finished, her fingers dancing across the quantum interface. I know, but we're out of options. The team had spent the last 2 hours reprogramming the Confederation's quantum computing cluster, teaching it to understand the principles that humanity had discovered during the First Void War. The elegant but rigid mathematical frameworks of Confederation science were being replaced with something more fluid, more intuitive. Connection established with Legacy Site 42, one of the crystalline engineers reported. That's the last one. Network topology is complete. Sarah studied the network diagram, now showing all 43 legacy sites as glowing points of potential. Each one contained systems that could locally lock reality into place, preventing the Void Collective's space-time manipulation. But they had to work in perfect harmony, creating a metastable field that would cover the entire core world's region. Dr. Chen, Vexterra burst into the control center. We've lost contact with the Sirius Defense Fleet. The Void Collective, they're not just destroying our ships anymore. They're altering local physics to make matter itself unstable. Entire planets are beginning to break down at the quantum level. Sarah's blood ran cold. This was new. In the First Void War, the enemy had limited themselves to tactical space-time manipulation. Now they were willing to unmake reality itself to achieve their goals. They know what we're trying to do, she realized. They recognize the network signature. They're trying to destroy everything before we can activate it. She turned to her team. New plan. We're going to have to light up the network in sections, creating a cascade of stable zones. But the risk factors, Telak began. Just doubled, I know. Sarah was already modifying the activation sequence. But if we don't try it, there won't be anything left to save. Transfer all power to the quantum computing cluster. We'll need every fraction of processing speed we can get. The next 3 hours were a blur of desperate calculations and last-second adjustments. Sarah's team watched in horror as the tactical display showed more and more systems falling to the Void Collective's reality-warping assault. But they also saw something else. The enemy was becoming more frantic, more aggressive, taking risks they hadn't before. They're afraid, Sarah murmured, watching the pattern of their advance. They remember what this network did to them last time. They're trying to destroy it before. A new alert cut her off. Void signatures were appearing in the closest core world system. They were out of time. Now or never, Sarah announced to her team. Initiating primary sequence. The quantum computing cluster screamed as it processed calculations that violated everything the Confederation thought they knew about physics. One by one, the legacy sites began to wake up, their dormant systems coming online after 3 centuries of waiting. The first reality anchor activated in the Proxima system. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the sensors showed something unprecedented. A bubble of pure, stable space-time, immune to the Void Collective's manipulation. It's working. Telak's plasma field flared with excitement. The quantum variance readings air. The entire facility shook as reality itself seemed to shudder. On the tactical display, they saw a Void Collective ship try to phase through normal space, only to find itself trapped in conventional physics. The ship's reality warping field collapsed, leaving it vulnerable to ordinary Confederation weapons. Second wave of activations, now. Sarah commanded. More legacy sites came online, their reality anchors creating a growing web of stable spacetime. The Void Collective ships began to panic, trying to retreat from the expanding field of locked physics. But something was wrong. Sarah saw the error messages starting to cascade across her display. The quantum harmonics weren't properly aligned. The network was becoming unstable. "We're losing containment," one of the engineers shouted. "The reality anchors are falling out of sync." Sarah watched as the carefully constructed field of stable spacetime began to fluctuate. If it collapsed now, the backlash would tear apart everything within 100 light-years. "Full power to the harmonic stabilizers," she ordered, her fingers flying across the interface. "Reroute everything through the primary node. We can't maintain the full network, but we can hold what we have." "But that would mean," Vexterra started, "sacrificing the outer systems." "Yes." Sarah's voice was grim. "But we can save the core worlds. Sometimes victory means choosing which losses you can live with." The tactical display told the story in brutal clarity. A shrinking sphere of stable spacetime, pushing the Void Collective back, but leaving the outer systems vulnerable. They would need another solution to protect those worlds. But for now, they had achieved something the enemy thought impossible. They had denied the Void Collective their primary advantage. Within the network's field of influence, reality itself refused to bend to their will. "Signal from the enemy fleet," Telek reported, his plasma form dimming with exhaustion. They're retreating, falling back to the outer rim." Sarah looked at the display, at the worlds they'd saved, and the ones they'd been forced to leave vulnerable. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "We've shown them we can still fight back, but now they'll look for other ways to attack. We need to find the rest of the legacy sites, complete the network before they return." "You mean there are more?" Vexterra's crystalline form shimmered with surprise. "This was just the emergency backup network," Sarah explained. "The complete system. Let's just say humanity learned not to keep all their innovations in one archive." She managed a tired smile. "Still think our primitive technology belongs in a museum." Inheritance. 1 month after the Battle of the Core Worlds, Sarah stood in the ruins of Legacy Site 17. The facility's outer shell had been breached by the Void Collective's reality warping weapons, but its quantum core remained intact, protected by principles of physics that the Confederation was only beginning to understand. The reconstruction teams found 3 more sites in this sector alone. Telak reported, his plasma form now housed in a more sophisticated containment field that could interact directly with the legacy systems, all disguised as abandoned research stations or waste processing facilities. "Your ancestors were thorough in their preparations." "They had to be," Sarah replied, examining the facility's quantum core. "The First Void War taught us that survival sometimes means hiding your best advantages in plain sight." She paused, running her hand along the seemingly primitive computer housing. "Even from yourself." The decision to hide the reality anchor network hadn't just been about protecting it from the enemy. It had been about protecting humanity from the temptation to use it for other purposes. The power to locally lock physics into place, to deny the fundamental forces of reality to your opponents. It was the kind of weapon that could reshape civilizations. "The Council has approved the formation of a new division," Vexterra announced, entering the chamber. Her crystalline form had evolved over the past month, incorporating patterns that mimicked the quantum harmonics of the legacy systems. "The Department of Alternative Physics. They want you to lead it." Sarah looked up from the quantum core, surprised. The Confederation is actually admitting there might be alternatives to their understanding of physics. Recent events have encouraged a revision of certain scientific principles. Vexterra's crystalline lattice shifted in what Sarah now recognized as wry amusement. "It seems that surviving an attack by reality-warping entities can broaden one's theoretical horizons." The tactical displays throughout the facility showed the current state of Confederation space. The core worlds were secure, protected by the activated portion of the legacy network, but the outer systems remained vulnerable, and long-range sensors detected Void Collective ships probing the boundaries of protected space, testing for weaknesses. "We found something else," Telak said, pulling up a new holographic display. "Hidden in the quantum storage of Site-23. Well, you should see for yourself." The display showed a vast network of quantum signatures, far larger than the emergency system they'd activated. Hundreds of legacy sites spread across the galaxy in seemingly random patterns. But Sarah saw the hidden purpose in their placement. They weren't just defensive positions, they were nodes in a larger machine. "It's not just a shield," she breathed, understanding dawning. "The complete network, it's a reality engine, capable of not just locking physics in place, but actively reshaping space-time across entire regions of space. A weapon that could rewrite the laws of physics themselves." Vexterra's form pulsed with concern. "No wonder your ancestors hid it so carefully." Sarah studied the network diagram, seeing the brilliance and desperation that had driven her ancestors to create such a system. "Not just a weapon," she corrected. "A tool. Like any advanced technology, it's how you use it that matters." She turned to face her colleagues, seeing not the dismissive aliens who had once mocked primitive human technology, but partners who had learned to look past their preconceptions. "The Void Collective thinks they found the limits of our defensive network. They don't realize that what we activated was just the backup system, the bare minimum needed to protect the core worlds. And now that we understand the principles behind it," Telek's plasma field brightened with excitement, "we can begin finding and activating the rest." "More than that," Sarah said, bringing up the complete schematics they'd decoded. "We can improve it. Your quantum engineering expertise, combined with humanity's alternative approach to physics, we can build something new, something better than either of our species could create alone." The facility's quantum core hummed with potential as Sarah laid out her plan. The Void Collective had retreated for now, but they would return. And when they did, they would face not just humanity's hidden legacy, but a new generation of defenders who understood that true advancement came not from dismissing the past, but from learning from it. The Council has also ordered all legacy sites to be removed from the Museum of Primitive Technology's catalog, Vexterra added, her crystalline form shimmering with what might have been embarrassment. "They feel the classification may have been premature." Sarah couldn't help but smile. "Keep a few pieces in the museum," she suggested, "as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful technologies are the ones you don't recognize, and that primitive is just another word for not yet understood." Above them, through the facility's broken ceiling, the stars shone with unwavering light. Somewhere out there, the Void Collective was regrouping, planning their next attack. But this time, humanity's legacy wouldn't stand alone. The combined knowledge of two civilizations, one that had mastered the known laws of physics, and one that had learned to break them, would be waiting. The quantum core's hum deepened as Sarah initiated the facility's repair sequences. The legacy network was awakening, piece by piece, preparing for a future its creators had hoped would never come. But they had planned for it anyway, hiding their greatest achievements in plain sight, trusting that when the time came, someone would understand the value of looking past appearances to see the true potential within. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about proving that advancement didn't always mean discarding the past. Sometimes the oldest technologies held the deepest secrets. And sometimes what looked like a primitive data center could turn out to be exactly the weapon you needed, if you were willing to look past the surface and see the brilliance hidden beneath.